She quietly paid for an old man's coffee, not knowing this single act of kindness was being watched by a man who owned cities, companies, and a lonely heart searching for something money could never buy. She thought it was just coffee. He knew it was destiny. Welcome to Heart, stirring stories where one small moment of kindness can change an entire lifetime. Today's story will remind you that love often arrives disguised as something ordinary. The bell above the cafe door rang softly as the old man stepped inside, carrying the weight of years on his shoulders. His coat was clean but worn, his shoes polished yet clearly old, and his posture slightly bent as if life itself had been leaning on him for far too long. The cafe was warm, filled with the gentle aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked bread, a small island of comfort in a busy city that rarely slowed down for anyone. He paused for a moment, letting his eyes adjust, then walked toward the counter with slow, careful steps. Behind the counter stood Lily, a young waitress whose smile had learned to survive even the longest shifts. She had been on her feet since early morning, serving customers who rushed in and out, some kind, most distracted, a few unnecessarily harsh. Yet her eyes still carried a softness that hadn't been worn down by exhaustion. When she looked up and saw the old man waiting patiently, something about him made her slow her movements, as if the world itself had asked her to be gentler. He studied the menu for a long time, tracing the printed words with his finger. When Lily asked what he'd like, his voice was quiet, almost apologetic. He ordered the simplest coffee on the list, nothing fancy, no extras. Just coffee. As he reached into his pocket, his hands trembled slightly, searching for coins and folded bills. Lily noticed the hesitation, the way he counted and recounted what little money he had, making sure it would be enough. She rang up the order and watched him shuffle toward a small table near the window. Outside, people passed by with purpose, their lives clearly going somewhere important. Inside, the old man sat alone, folding his hands around the warm cup when it arrived, as if the heat itself offered comfort. He didn't drink immediately. Instead, he stared into the coffee, lost in thoughts that seemed heavier than his frail frame. Lily found herself glancing at him between orders. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow, or maybe it was the way he smiled faintly at nothing, as though remembering a life that once felt full. When she saw him pull out a small notebook and begin writing slowly, carefully, her curiosity deepened. At the end of her shift, as the cafe grew quieter, Lily walked past his table to wipe it down. She noticed the notebook was filled with neat handwriting, lines upon lines of thoughts, memories, perhaps letters never sent. He quickly closed it, embarrassed, and apologized for taking up space. Lily told him it was no trouble at all, her voice warm and sincere. When he finished his coffee, he stood up, reaching once more into his pocket. Lily saw the moment his face fell. He had miscounted. He was short by a small amount, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to him it might as well have been the world. He looked around, clearly flustered, ready to offer an apology before she even said a word. Without thinking, Lily shook her head and smiled. She told him it was already taken care of. He blinked in surprise, confusion washing over his tired features. She explained gently that she had paid for it. It was just coffee, she said, as if it meant nothing at all. But to the old man it meant everything. His eyes filled with emotion he tried desperately to hide. He thanked her more than once, his voice breaking slightly, and promised to repay her someday. Lily laughed softly and told him to just pass the kindness on when he could. He nodded, gripping his notebook tightly, and before leaving, he paused to look at her as if trying to memorize her face. What Lily didn't notice was the man sitting in the corner of the cafe, watching quietly. He was dressed simply, but there was an unmistakable confidence in the way he carried himself. His eyes were sharp, observant, missing nothing. He had been there the entire time, sipping his drink slowly, pretending to read the newspaper while studying the scene unfold. His name was Adrian Blackwood. To the world, Adrian was a billionaire investor, a man whose decisions shaped industries and whose name appeared regularly in business headlines. But here, in this cafe, he was simply a man observing something money couldn't buy. He had come in that morning with a strange purpose, one he barely understood himself. Years of success had given him everything except companionship. Relationships in his life had always felt transactional, built on status rather than sincerity. After his last engagement ended when he discovered his fiancée was more in love with his wealth than with him, something inside Adrian had changed. He grew tired of being admired for what he owned instead of who he was. That morning, he decided to step away from boardrooms and luxury cars to sit among ordinary people and watch how they treated one another when no reward was guaranteed. And then he saw Lily. He saw the way she listened to customers, how she remembered small details, how her smile didn't disappear when she thought no one was looking. But it was the moment she paid for the old man's coffee that truly caught his attention. There was no hesitation, no expectation, just kindness, pure and simple. Adrian felt something stir inside him, something unfamiliar yet deeply powerful. He watched the old man leave, gratitude etched into every line of his face, and then he watched Lily return to her duties as if nothing extraordinary had happened. That was what made it extraordinary. Later that afternoon, Adrian approached the counter to pay. Lily rang him up, unaware of who he was. He made casual conversation, asking about her day, the cafe, her favorite drink. She answered politely, never once treating him differently from anyone else. When he asked why she worked here, she shrugged and said she liked making people feel a little better, even if just for a few minutes. That answer stayed with him long after he left. Over the next few days, Adrian found excuses to return. Sometimes he ordered coffee, sometimes just sat quietly. Each time, he learned something new about Lily. She worked 2 jobs to support her younger brother's education. She dreamed of opening a small bookstore cafe one day. She believed that kindness mattered, even when the world made it hard to believe so. What Lily didn't know was that Adrian had begun asking questions about her life through discreet channels, careful not to invade her privacy but curious enough to understand her world. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that she was unlike anyone he had ever known. Meanwhile, the old man returned to the cafe as well. His name was Harold. He and Lily developed a quiet friendship, exchanging smiles and short conversations. He often wrote in his notebook, sometimes leaving pages behind accidentally, which Lily would carefully keep for him. She never read them. She felt they were sacred. One afternoon, Harold asked Lily why she had paid for his coffee that day. She answered honestly, saying she saw someone who needed a little kindness. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. Before leaving, he handed her the notebook, asking her to keep it safe for a while. She agreed, unaware of its true significance. That night, Adrian sat alone in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights. His wealth surrounded him, yet it had never felt emptier. He thought of Lily's smile, of her effortless compassion, and of the quiet strength she carried. For the first time in years, he didn't feel guarded. He felt hopeful. He decided then that he wouldn't reveal who he was, not yet. He wanted to know Lily as she truly was, without the influence of his name or fortune. He wanted to see if what he felt could exist in honesty. Back at the cafe, Lily closed up for the night, unaware that her simple act of kindness had set something far bigger into motion. As she locked the door and stepped into the cool night air, she felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if her life was standing at the edge of something unknown. She had no idea that 2 men, one with nothing and one with everything, had both seen her heart that day. And neither of them would ever forget it. The days that followed began to change in ways Lily couldn't explain. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface. The cafe remained the same, her routine unchanged, yet something beneath it all felt different, as if life itself had started leaning closer, listening more carefully to her every step. Adrian continued to visit, always polite, always calm, never demanding more attention than any other customer. And that was exactly what made him stand out. He never rushed her. He never looked at his phone while she spoke. When she talked, he listened in a way that made her feel seen, not examined. Slowly, conversations that once stayed on the surface began to deepen. They talked about books, about dreams left behind, about the strange loneliness that could exist even in a crowded room. Lily found herself opening up without realizing it, her words flowing freely, unguarded. Adrian, on the other hand, was fighting a quiet battle within himself. Every instinct told him to protect his identity, to keep his wealth hidden until he was sure. Yet, with every laugh Lily shared, with every thoughtful pause she took before answering his questions, the weight of that secret grew heavier. He wasn't used to holding back truths, especially ones that mattered this much. One evening, as the cafe prepared to close, Lily noticed Adrian lingering. The city outside glowed with evening lights, reflecting softly against the windows. She wiped down the counter while he sat silently, his hands folded, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he asked if she would like to join him for a walk sometime. Not dinner, not anything extravagant, just a walk. She hesitated for a moment, surprised, then nodded. There was something honest in the way he asked, something free of expectation. They agreed to meet after her shift the following evening. That walk became the first of many moments that felt quietly profound. They walked through a nearby park, leaves crunching beneath their feet, the air cool and comforting. Adrian spoke about growing up with very little, about how success had come later, fast and overwhelming. He carefully avoided mentioning numbers, companies, or fame. Lily shared her struggles, her fears of never quite reaching her dreams, her hope that kindness might somehow shape her future. As weeks passed, their connection deepened. Adrian learned how Lily tilted her head when she was thinking, how she smiled when she was nervous, how she always stopped to help strangers even when she was tired. Lily learned that Adrian carried sadness behind his calm, a sense of loss that success had never healed. Meanwhile, Harold continued visiting the cafe, always watching quietly, always smiling knowingly. One afternoon, when Lily returned his notebook, he thanked her and told her she had a rare gift. She asked what he meant, and he replied that she saw people for who they were, not what they had. His words lingered with her long after he left. The turning point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, Lily was asked to deliver a catering order to a corporate building across town. When she arrived, her breath caught in her throat. The lobby was massive, polished marble floors stretching beneath towering ceilings. Screens displayed market updates, and employees moved with purpose, dressed sharply, speaking in hushed tones. She felt painfully out of place. As she waited for someone to sign the receipt, a group of people entered the lobby. At their center was Adrian, not the Adrian she knew. This Adrian wore a tailored suit, his posture commanding, his presence undeniable. People stepped aside instinctively, greeting him with respect, even reverence. Someone called him Mr. Blackwood. Another mentioned a board meeting. Lily's heart began to pound as realization crashed into her. He was wealthy. No, he was powerful. Their eyes met across the lobby. Adrian froze. In that instant, every carefully built wall collapsed. Lily saw the truth in his expression before he even spoke. Shock, fear, regret. He walked toward her slowly, dismissing the people around him with a subtle gesture. When he stood before her, the silence between them was unbearable. Lily handed over the receipt mechanically, her hands trembling. "You didn't tell me," she said quietly. Adrian swallowed hard. He apologized, his voice low, explaining that he never meant to deceive her, only to protect something fragile before it was tested by wealth. Lily listened, but the words blurred together. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was the choice he made not to trust her with the truth. She left without another word. Days passed, then weeks. Lily avoided the cafe where they had met, switched shifts, buried herself in work. Adrian tried reaching out, but she never answered. For the first time in his life, money could not fix what he had broken. It was Harold who finally intervened. One evening, Lily found Harold waiting outside the cafe after her shift. He looked more serious than usual. He asked if they could talk. They sat on a nearby bench as the city hummed around them. Harold spoke of Adrian, revealing that he had known him for years. He spoke of Adrian's loneliness, of his fear of being loved only for his wealth. Then Harold opened his notebook. Inside were letters. Letters Adrian had written over time, reflections on life, on loss, on hope. And among them, pages filled with thoughts about Lily, about the waitress who paid for coffee without expecting anything in return. About how that moment changed everything. Harold explained that he wasn't just an old man down on his luck. He was Adrian's mentor, someone who had helped shape the man he became. The coffee test had never been planned, but Lily's kindness had answered a question Adrian didn't know how to ask. Lily cried quietly as she read the words, not because of the wealth, not because of the lie, but because she finally understood the fear behind it. She realized Adrian hadn't hidden his wealth to manipulate her. He had hidden it to protect the truth of what they were building. The next day, Lily returned to the cafe. Adrian was there, sitting at their usual table, his face tired, his confidence stripped bare. When he saw her, he stood immediately, hope flickering in his eyes. Lily sat across from him, her heart pounding. She told him she didn't need his money, his status, or his world. What she needed was honesty. Adrian promised her that no more hiding, no more tests, just truth. Months later, their relationship blossomed openly. Lily met Adrian's world, not as someone impressed by it, but as someone grounded enough not to be consumed by it. Adrian supported her dream of opening a bookstore cafe, not as a benefactor, but as a partner. And on a quiet morning, in the same cafe where it all began, Adrian knelt before Lily, not with diamonds or grand gestures, but with a simple ring and a simple question. Lily said yes with tears in her eyes, knowing she was choosing a man, not a fortune. As for Harold, he watched from a distance, smiling, his notebook now complete, because sometimes the greatest wealth is found not in what you give, but in how you love. True love never arrives with announcements or price tags. It slips quietly into life through small, ordinary moments, like paying for a cup of coffee for someone who needs it. Lily didn't know she was changing her future that day. She only knew she was being kind. And that kindness became the foundation of a love built on honesty, respect, and heart. Because in the end, wealth fades, status disappears, and names are forgotten. But a pure heart leaves a mark that lasts forever. And sometimes, the greatest love stories begin not with grand gestures, but with one simple act of compassion.